Excellent. Okay, so now we are back into. Someone asked me about how to explain that sampling thing again. Sampling frequency versus sampling resolution. Okay, so the best way to describe it is to show you the waveform. Okay, just to show you the waveform. And let me see if this works. I want to see whether I can use Audacity to do some recording as I am actually doing the screen recording. So I go to multimedia, not the mixer, and then go to Audacity. Now Audacity, have we talked about Audacity when we talked about applications? No? Okay. I thought we did. Okay, we kind of mentioned it, but it's not one of the ones actually listed when when we talked about Audacity. Applications. Audacity is basically, look at this as Microsoft Word for audio files. Okay, it allows you to download and visualize all WAV files and all MP3 and different type of file formats, audio files of different formats. But it also gives you the tool to manipulate all those things and also visualize as waves. Okay, so that's basically what I'm trying to do here, is to do some sampling, just to record from the microphone, and then we can see what we are actually seeing. So I think this is going to be mic. We'll go with a default mic 0, mic 1. I don't know which one is going to be good. Okay, yeah, this one is definitely recording, and I think it's recording my voice. Yep. All right. Okay. So what you're seeing here is basically the waveform. In other words, if I magnify just a portion of that, now you can also see, I know most people cannot see this part here. It is recording in stereo, 44/100 hertz at 30, using 32-bit float. Okay, so I can change that later. But what I do want to show you is what it looks like when you look at it really, really close up. So I'm going to go use one tool. Oops, not the tool. This tool here. There's one tool to zoom in, just to, I know I can do that part. Let me look for a portion where the waveform is a little bit more interesting. Louder, maybe. I can do this. There we go. So you can actually see, this is basically sound wave, except it is displayed as a graph. The horizontal axis, which goes from left to right, is time axis. Okay, in other words, this is what is recorded earlier. This is what is recorded later, and you can also see from the time scale. This time scale is representing time in seconds. In other words, this line here is what is recorded 3.56 seconds into the recording. This is basically 10 milliseconds later, and then 10 milliseconds later, and then 10 milliseconds later. Are we still doing okay so far with this concept?
Is light like that? Beams of light like that?
Radio frequency can be seen like that too, but the time will be completely different because the wavelength of visible light is very, very short. Is it in nanometers? I think it's in nanometers, in hundreds of nanometers. I think blue is closer to 400 or 500 nanometers, and then red is close to 600 nanometers. How many people still remember what is nano as a unit or as a scale? 1 nano is a billionth of something. Okay, so it's really small. So light wave, has a very short wavelength. This is not wavelength. So we are not measuring in terms of distance. But distance and time are proportional. So it's kind of like that. But the scale is definitely not in distance. Okay. So let's take an even closer look. Okay. So we can take an even closer look, in terms of magnifying time by using the zoom in feature. So you can see that I'm zooming in even more, and you can see how the wave is now starting to become more discrete, I should say. In other words, you can actually start to see the jaggedness of the wave.
So what would sound wave look like in distance?
In what?
In a distance.
From a distance?
Yeah, would it look the same?
Well, this is a visualization. You cannot see sound wave because it is really the compression of air and expansion and compression of air. I suppose you can see it if you can see, you can visualize. You can actually see the visual effect of it. Like if you remember how I said you can fill up a balloon and put a aluminum foil on the surface and then use a laser to, so that the laser beam is reflecting out of the aluminum foil, and then you can look at the reflection. When the balloon itself is completely stable or completely static and not moving, and you can clap your hand and talk and really loud, and you can actually see the laser beam, or the reflection of the laser beam doing stuff like this. And that's one way to visualize, sound wave. But the actual wave itself cannot be visualized. So it's not like, wave from the ocean where you can actually see, the wave coming in.
Yeah.
Because air itself is not visible.
So pulse waves and stuff like that, it's not visible either?
Pulse wave?
Pulse wave, like shock wave?
Shock wave is not visible except when an airplane goes supersonic. Then you can actually see the boom. When the airplane gets into the supersonic range from subsonic, you see it. You can actually see the cloud forming, and that has to do with the pressure wave. It actually has to do with the decompression of the pressure wave, causing the temperature to drop, so that water droplets starts to form.
Like bombs and stuff, you can't see the shock wave?
No, you cannot see the actual shock wave, but you can see the effect of shock wave. Just like with sound, you cannot see sound, but you can see the effect of sound. How many people have like a really good big 12-inch subwoofer? Okay. Now I don't want you to mess with it. So you can just look at it if you want to, okay? So if you're playing some music, that has like bass guitar. Now bass guitar is a really good instrument to use because it has that impulse, right? When you plug the cord of a bass guitar, the initial amplitude is really high, okay? And you can actually see the diaphragm of the speaker, moving, because it's moving slowly enough that you can actually see it with your eyes. Now, high frequency stuff is way too fast. Our human eyes cannot pick up the vibration at all. But with lower frequencies, like 20 hertz to about maybe 40 hertz, if you have a really good bass speaker, you can actually see the entire diaphragm moving back and forth.
I was also going to point out that a good way to see the difference between wavelengths is if you've ever pulled up behind a car that has a lot of bass in it. If you're sitting next to them, you're actually hearing the bass louder than they are in the car because the bass wave is longer than their car.
Yeah, and if you look at their, if their bass speaker is really good, you can actually look at their window and you can actually see the vibration.
Yeah.
What about a signal?
Signal. What do you mean by signal?
From here to like a satellite.
That's a radio wave. That's radio wave, which is the same as light wave, except the wavelength is much longer. So we cannot see radio wave, because our human eyes is only can only detect electromagnetic wave in a certain frequency. So radio wave is way beyond our range of perception. Yep.
The only way you're going to be able to see that is with a spectrum analyzer, right?
Yeah, spectral analyzer, but a spectral analyzer will only display it in the frequency domain, but not in the time domain. The frequency domain means it is telling you how much of each frequency is in the final waveform.
You can do that to this one.
And you can definitely do it with this one too. So what I'm trying to do here is to magnify just enough so that this is the best I can do. It's still really smooth. Okay, so we'll keep this one around. Okay, we'll save the file and keep this one around for now. So we'll save this particular project. And we'll just stash it into our, maybe I'll just create a folder for today. So I will say this one is high resolution. Okay. So next I want to do something that has a lower resolution. So I have to check out. I have to check with the tool to see how I can change the recording resolution. So if you go to edit preferences. Let me go to device recording quality. There we go. Okay. So this particular screen, is something in Audacity that allows you to specify what type of quality you want to use when you're recording sound. And these are the terms that we have talked about, or some of the terms, should look familiar. The first one is the default sampling rate. In this case, we are sampling at 44,100 hertz, which means we are basically collecting data points 44,100 times per second. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, that is a lot. And remember, this number has to be twice the highest frequency that we can hear. And some people can hear up to maybe 20 kilohertz or so, and that the ability to hear high frequency will basically decrease over time as people age. That's the first frequency to lose is the high frequencies. I can still hear mosquito tones. If you have a phone app, with mosquito tone, I can actually hear that. But I cannot really tell the tone difference, between, if you give me like 18,000 hertz and then 20,000 hertz, I cannot tell the difference at all. I can just sense that there is high frequency, but I cannot actually tell, which one is higher. Okay, and some people may be able to do it. So let me try to downsample that to maybe 1125, and then the sample format. Well, let me just do this first. Okay, so we'll. Interpolator, okay, so click OK. And we start with something new. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. So I'm gonna record, I will talk closer to the mic, so it's going basically at a full range. And I'll stop it here. Okay, so here, this is also an opportunity for me to talk about clipping, in terms of recording. You don't want the waveform to touch the rails, okay? What I refer to as the rail is basically the top part here and also the bottom part here. Because if your audio recording is touching the rails, okay, it means there are sounds that are too loud for the microphone to pick up, correctly. And that's also called clipping. In other words, when you look at the waveform, it's a plateau because the sound wave is just the amplitude is too high for your microphone to record. Then your recording is not going to be truthful anymore because it's losing information. Okay, it's just too loud. It will sound distorted. Exactly, it will sound very distorted. When you are running into the rails. So this is pretty good. Okay, this is getting close to the rail, but it's not touching the rails yet. The top part and the bottom part are called the rails, and that's from signal processing and op amps and stuff like that. What I'll do is I'll focus on this part here. Now there should be a tool to let me just focus on a particular part. Fit selection. There we go. So I just pick the selection and then click it, and you can see how it is just magnified. It's making the entire width of the window to fit only the part that I have selected, which is really helpful because now I can select even a smaller part and only magnify that part. So let me go do that. Okay, so I will just select this part and then magnify and fit this particular selection over the entire screen. Now things looks a little bit interesting. What are those little dots?
Sample points.
Yep, exactly. Those dots are the actual sample points. In other words, if you look at the time scale, okay, this is one time that I make, that the microphone or the computer collected one sample. This is another time. This is another time. This is another time. You can look at the bottom here. It shows you the exact time of the time frame. This is 4.817 seconds, and then the next one is 4.818, and so on. Okay. When you use a higher sampling rate, you're basically looking at more dots over the same period of time. Am I still doing okay so far? So which one is better? Which one do you think will more faithfully record the original sound? More dots or fewer dots? More dots, okay? So more dots means a higher sampling frequency. Yep.
top and bottom, is that as a backup or is it left, right?
Left, right.
Why is there two?
Sorry?
It's in
Why is there
stereo.
two waves?
Well, it thinks it's stereo. It's actually mono because this particular microphone is only mono, so it's actually only recording in mono. But since I tell the recorder to record in stereo, it's just replicating the same channel into two. So they're identical in this case.
Oh,
We
so each one
don't
is
we
a
don't
channel.
truly, huh?
Each one is a channel.
Each one is a channel. Yep.
Two tracks, yeah.
So there are two tracks, there are two channels, but they are actually copies of each other because the microphone itself is only capable of mono recording. Yep. I used to have a stereo recording device, but I don't use it anymore because it's much bulkier. This one is a whole lot easier to set up and it's more compact. And I don't think you guys need to tell where I am in the classroom when you're listening to the recording. Yep.
So if it was stereo, the wavelengths would be different, the top and bottom.
Can be different depending on the source of the sound. Sometimes it's off phase. In other words, they are the same wave, but they're offset by time a little bit. And that's how our human ears can tell the direction of a sound is by the phase part of the sound or the delay of a pulse and stuff like that.
So we hear in stereo.
Oh, we definitely hear in stereo. I mean, in other words, if you listen to a radio, and you turn off the stereo feature, so it's mono, you can tell the difference right away. All right, so the explanation of sampling frequency is okay. Does everybody understand the impact of sampling frequency? It's basically how many dots do we use to represent sound over the same period of time. The more dots, the more faithful we are recording the original sound. The fewer dots means the less faithful it is. Okay. Are we doing okay so far with that part? Okay. So I'm going to save this file again, so that we have something to compare to. So I'm saving it to today's whole. This is going to be low sampling frequency. All right. And I'll create another project. So this time I'm going to change one more thing. So I go to Edit, Preferences, and go back to Quality. So this time, in addition to changing the sampling rate, I'm also going to change the sample format. It doesn't give me the really crappy ones. Because I want to show you what it looks like, when you're using 8-bit, of encoding, because the sound will look kind of really jagged. But it doesn't give me that option, which is kind of unfortunate. Sorry?
16 still not very good.
The 16 is still really good enough that we cannot see it. We cannot visually see the jagged edges. So I can't really do that part. But what I can do is to go back into here and see if I can do something like this. Okay. So what I've done is I'm zooming in, but this time I'm zooming in terms of vertical. When your sample resolution is really low, it means these dots cannot be quote unquote any place on the screen. They can only occur. The dots can only occur at certain places, and that really changes the quality of the sound as well. I cannot give you the visualization of this because this software does not let me do that. Let me see if it has an option to down convert something. So we can go to Effect, Compressor. Nope, I don't think that's going to do it. Has anyone used Audacity enough to see whether I can down convert the quality of the sound? Decrease the resolution.
Not without a plugin.
Sorry?
I don't think you can do it without the plugin.
There's no reason to do it, right?
Yeah,
because you're
exactly.
losing information in the
Using
process.
this program, you'd want higher quality rather than lower.
I know there may be a way to do it. Okay.
There's
Let me see
ways
if I
to
can
make it sound.
Let me see if I can do this. I can export it to a particular file. Okay, so I can export it to, let's see, Sign 16. So these are all pretty good quality already. I have to pick one that has a custom FFmpeg export. And doesn't give me an option to down convert it. All right, so we'll have to do it in another way. Do you guys still want to visualize, what it looks like when you have a low sampling resolution?
Why not?
Okay. Because what I need to do is to look for actual samples. Let's search for low sampling resolution audio. Okay, we can give this a try. So this is pretty close to what we want. And we'll save it into its folder. And also remember, sometimes things that we cannot visualize, we can still hear the difference. Does anyone listen to AM radio anymore in this class? Sometimes? No. That's basically what the difference is. Okay, FM has really good resolution, both in terms of sampling rate and also in terms of resolution, resolution. But when you're looking at FM, it is a much higher quality. So let's see if we can do this one here and find out whether I can visualize it. So open it up, make a copy. Okay, there we go. And we want to do the same thing here. Just pick a little small part of this and then magnify that. Okay, smaller part, magnify again. Still doesn't show it. Let me see if I can do this part. I think that really shows it now. Do you see that there are only, okay, when you look at the dots, okay, how many people, can you guys see the dots? Okay, even from back there? Okay. Because I can just, unselect this part to make the contrast a little bit better, just like that. Okay, that's better. Okay, so when you look at this, do you notice, how dots can only appear at certain places vertically? At some places, the dots cannot be anywhere. It can only be at certain places when you're looking at it vertically. Right? I mean, look at this. Look at these two dots. These two dots, this one and this one, they are at exactly the same place when you look at the vertical part. When you look at these three dots, they are exactly at the same place. What are the chances that they should be at the same place exactly when you're recording some actual audio? It's really low. Okay, so this is the effect of having a low sampling resolution. In fact, what you can also do is you can see that these numbers here, you can see that they are arranged by a particular scale, and when we scroll this a little bit, you can see the effect also. Do you see these two dots here? This dot and this dot? No dot can exist between those two dots. That's basically as close as two dots can be, when you look at those two dots. And that's the effect or the artifact of having a low sampling resolution. Okay. So when you compare something like this to the files that we were opening before, so let me do the same thing with the other files that we have done already. So let's go ahead and open low sampling frequency. So this one, even though the sampling frequency is really low, it still has a high resolution in terms of sample resolution. So we'll go take a look at just this part here. Do you see any two dots, arranged at exactly the same place when you look at it vertically? Yes. They seem to be the same, but are they exactly the same? Go ahead. Which two ones?
Tenet of 4.8185 and 4.8 to 110.
4.8 to 110. Even and this one and this one. This one here.
No, at the bottom.
The bottom.
So not that point, the first point, but the one after it.
This one.
Go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the seventh one. One of them. That one. And that one.
And this one.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see whether they are the same or not. So we'll select it, and then we'll zoom in just to that part. Yeah, you're right. They are pretty. They're probably exactly the same. But yet, there's one point in between, or just slightly off.
Just tell by the
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can tell the point you're trying to demonstrate for the one right before it.
Right. Yep. But the frequency of having dots appearing at exactly the same place vertically is much lower. So there are places where you can have the same dots, but they don't occur as frequently anymore. Okay. So that's better. Okay, because if vertically speaking you only have 16 spots, then the sound would look will sound really awful because you're losing a lot of details. It's kind of like how many people play Minecraft. Okay, let me show you what Minecraft looks like, what the character looks like, and you can tell me whether they look like real people or not. And we look at images. That's a good one. Does that look like a real person to you? It's not, right? Because there's not enough resolution. Yep.
Why did they do that when the background looks so nice?
I think this one is intentional like that. So it's this one is actually I think it's a background art for people who do play Minecraft. So it just gives you the contrast of high resolution for the background, but really pixelated character when it comes to the character itself. Okay, so this is the effect of low sampling resolution. Okay, you simply don't have enough dots, or the dots are too big to represent the information that you want to represent. The same concept applies to bitmaps. It applies to many other things too. The other way to look at this is how fine of a structure can you make out of huge big bricks. Okay, not very fine, right? I mean, you can do something, you can approximate certain shapes, but it won't do a very good job at actually handling the details. Okay, think about like life-size sculpture or statues. Okay, if you use regular bricks to make a statue, how close can you make that to a particular person, especially the facial expression?
You have to make it taller.
On the other hand, if you use clay, how close can you make that? Assuming you're a really good artist, okay? If you use clay, can you reproduce the shape, the actual facial feature of a particular person?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? I mean, if you have the skill, the material has the ability to do it. What is the resolution in this case? What is related? What is the relationship between resolution and clay and brick? Brick has a high resolution or low resolution?
Low resolution.
It has a very low resolution. And then when you look at the particles in clay, does it have a high resolution or low resolution? High resolution, exactly. So that's basically what it is. It's the density of information. How many dots can be used per inch, per square inch, per cubic inch, or per time. Okay, so those are all basically resolution. Minecraft is really interesting because they make helmets about the life size of these particular characters, and there are people wearing those helmets and walking around, so they are basically pretending to be Minecraft characters.
I saw somebody here yesterday. Walking.
Really?
Yes.
Well, now you know where it comes from. Yep, it's come from Minecraft. And then they also make life-size pigs and swords like these, and they're also pixelated just like that. So people
Well, he was just wearing a helmet that had big old ears on it, made out of like paper mache or something.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if it was, but it was definitely from a video game or something.
Oh.
They sell that stuff at
And also Think Geek. There are many places that will
What
sell
kind of
this
game
kind of
is
stuff.
Minecraft?
Huh?
What kind of game is it?
It's kind of like this big open world thing where the most of a there's like not even a story. It's all focused on your character, that little guy, basically goes around and breaks down like dirt, wood. It's like a massive creation game. Like the whole thing is like playing with Legos.
You have to mine
But
materials.
yeah, you have to mine everything that you have. You start out with nothing but your fists, and you have to punch trees to get wood and all sorts of different things.
There are, if you want to know what Minecraft is and why it is people are so crazy about Minecraft, go to YouTube, type Minecraft, and you will find out what people are doing with Minecraft and why it is so popular, with people. Yep.
There's also a game called Terraria, which is like more 8-bit.
Sorry?
There's a game called Terraria,
Okay.
and it's side-scrolling, but you do the same thing.
Oh, okay. So it's basically a free world. You can explore, and there are things you can do, structures you can create, tools that you can create out of material that you mine, that you get out of the resources. So it's really just a big simulated world, but it's not like SimCity, where this is at a very micro level and not at a macro
But
level.
you can still build huge structures.
You can build huge
Very
structures.
Complex things.
Yep.
There's
Minecraft world is the size of Saturn.
engineers that build really
Minecraft world is the size of Saturn.
Sorry?
Minecraft world is the size of Saturn.
Saturn?
It's the size of Saturn, but it doesn't render it all at once.
I would imagine you probably won't have enough RAM to render all at once.
No computer on Earth has that much power.
Yep. So you can only render a portion at a time. Yep. All right. Well, that's what video games are becoming like. I mean, they're basically they no longer give you a certain path. Only certain missions, certain objectives that you have to accomplish. They give you the freedom to explore, the freedom to build, the freedom to interact with other players. You have to watch one of these video clips to really find out what it is about. And my kids are all addicted to Minecraft. The good thing is I only let them play 2 hours per day on the weekends. Yep.
It's been left over.
No, I think now they released the ones that can be used like for schools, so like teachers can actually teach with the games.
Cool.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think if they try to teach like math and language, art through Minecraft, students will just get those materials like right away. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting it. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to point out that there's a game that came out a while ago called Second Life, where you could actually, kind of like Minecraft, except rather than just having blocks that you move around,
Mhm.
you can generate these blocks and program scripts into them. So it's even more open.
Yeah, Roblox is like that. You can write your own scripts, and make your own game.
Yeah.
But the scripts kind of defeat the whole purpose of making it open-ended and flexible.
It was more like an MMO, and there's actually money in the game.
Oh, okay, I
You
see.
could actually very easily, through the company, convert into real currency.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, when my daughter, she was 16, 15, she used to play type 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And what she does is make a city, like a New York City.
Mhm.
And she paid money,
Mhm.
she just built the house and
Yes.
the building.
Uh-huh.
And at the time she was a junior, like junior year. And they were testing her, what kind of career she wants, like that. So
Mhm.
she was testing like a civil engineering, which is something that she's not like it. And because of that game,
Right.
she just, made
Well, there
that.
are ways you can make money out of video games. Okay, so well, I know I'm digressing again, but I think once again, these topics are related to computer science in general. How do you make money out of games? Because when I grew up, my parents told me, don't play video games, or video games are bad because it will only hinder your homework and stuff like that. You can never make money out of video games and whatnot. That statement is still kind of true, but at the same time, it's not true anymore. So how do you make money out of video games? Go ahead.
But they all were free, and you can sell items that you get at the end for actual money.
Yep. In other words, you can create or you can acquire resources and tools and other things, in a video game, and some video games, make it so that it is transferable. Okay.
What's called the optional now.
Okay. But the game has to support that feature. In other words, you have to be able to transfer either money or tools or possessions of whatever from one account to another account. So people are actually paying money, actual physical money, to get resources. Yep, go ahead.
What's really big right now, a game called League of Legends. The advertisements are huge. Like they get $3 for every 1,000 views they get on the advertisements when they're streaming.
Uh-huh.
They can have up to anywhere from 50 to like 75,000 viewers. So
Okay.
if you hit the advertise button once, that's something like a couple $100.
Wow. Go ahead.
The whole thing is it's been around a couple of years. It's starting to really get big. Is esports. It's basically just sports, but video games.
Video game sports.
Right.
Uh-huh.
It's been around for a couple of years, but it's really starting to pick up. I mean, they've held huge competitions where they've given away several $1 million in prize money just for playing games.
Kind of like gladiators. Okay.
I think it's called like the NGL,
NGL.
National Gaming League.
Okay.
So if I understand you correctly, you have an account, you build a character to a certain level, and you can sell that to someone else?
It's not just the character, but also you can just sell the gold
Sell
that you have
weapons,
collected.
armors,
Yep.
stuff like
Pickaxe, swords, bows, arrows.
that. Yes.
Yep.
Apparently, there was a story in the Korean news about this duo that actually planned bank robberies over They pulled it off several times before they were finally caught by the cyber crime systems.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, mafia use this all the time to plan nowadays because the police don't have any way to listen in on these conversations because they don't know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the game world.
Mm-hmm.
They can track them on a physical location, but they can't track them in the game.
I
It
see.
makes it hard to find out where they hang. They're going to plan things.
I think the World of Warcraft admins are supposed to monitor that.
Supposed to.
There's a lot of chatter to be monitoring.
Right. Right. Yep. This is. Yep. Go ahead.
Actually, you can even, a lot of organized crime organizations, they even use World of Warcraft or other free-to-play games as ways to launder money. As in, they buy up a certain amount of in-gold currency, in-game currency,
Right.
using real money to launder, and then they cash it out elsewhere on the planet they actually let you convert in-game currency to real cash. It's something
Right.
So it's pretty interesting. There's no.
Well, as long as you can sell your game currency for actual money, that's the key to basically do the conversion from physical money to game currency, and then game currency back to actual money.
So it's just the most ridiculous way to launder money, but they can't catch you. That's
Not easily, definitely not easily. All right. So are we doing okay so far? Yep. Go ahead.
Maybe this is off the track, but I think this is a true story. In high school, there was one guy who was like 17 years old, and he was playing a game called Grand Theft Auto.
Mm-hmm.
You know that?
Yep.
He was playing the game, and then some people really got shot, or his parents. Wait a minute. He was 17 years old and he was playing this game where you're killing all these people, and then in real life he shot his parents because of the game. It was sad.
Well, that was kind of old already. That's kind of old news. I know what you're talking about. With the last school shooting, they found that the shooter was playing a lot of Call of Duty.
Yeah, and they had some of the Navy SEALs had put some stuff on the game, and so they got in trouble.
Right, the Navy SEALs were helping to design the game to make it more realistic, but they were in the process. I guess the department of the Army or the Navy decided they were disclosing classified information, and that's why they got into trouble. Yep.
You can't say that the video games make them do this. They have a mental illness that is unaddressed.
But
Right.
it's not always mental illness, though. That's just the first thing that they blame it on, isn't it? Because there's are guys that,
They
like
might
that,
not have it.
like that police officer, there was no mental illness there. He just,
But
he got denied his promotion, and
Mm-hmm. You
there
work.
was other stuff.
I think
Yeah,
it
there was
has
a
to
lot
do
more
a lot
than
with
that.
social skills. If you
Okay,
sit in
now,
front of a
now,
computer-
I like this discussion. I know where this is going because it is, again, I like where it's going because it is related to this class, okay? Because what is the effect of these games and people staying online
Influence.
instead of offline, okay?
it's
Now,
influence.
huh?
It's influence.
It's influence. Okay, so let's make a comparison. Okay, so I'm okay. I like that. I like that response. Okay, let's compare these two things. Okay, there are people who would like to play with guns, regardless. All right. So let's do a conditional branch here. Okay, so let's say that one decided to say I enjoy the great outdoors, the sun and whatnot. So I'm gonna pick up paintball or soft airsoft. Okay, so I'm going into the woods in the forest with a bunch of guys, and we'll just shoot each other up with these plastic bullets. Okay, wearing full protection so they don't get actually injured in the process. And then the other person decides, well, I can do all this with my, Xbox 360, with Call of Duty, Black Ops or whatever. So I can do this, with just a controller in the comfort of my home, having, my drink right next to me and whatnot. Okay. So the question now is, what is the difference? Does it make any difference? One guy is running out there getting shot at by these plastic BBs. It is not going to injure the person, okay? But nonetheless, he's getting he's going outside, he's doing exercise. The other person is staying inside, okay? Shooting another person on screen, with all the blood and gory stuff. What would be what is the difference? What are the differences between these two?
I think that
Go ahead.
the difference between it is, one is actually, it's not real. You're not actually, you see it hit somebody and the person blows up or whatever it does. But the other one, you can get clipped in the arm and know how it feels. You know
Okay.
what I mean?
All right. Go ahead.
What about the guy that did the shooting in Arizona? He was like a physics genius. Where's the mental illness in that? He just snapped and went into the drive-in and started, I mean, to the movie theater and started killing people. So where is
Okay.
the mental
There's
illness there?
something that's not addressed. I'm gonna have to argue that it's not influence because I've played violent video games all my life. I'm not going around assaulting people.
Well, the question is, besides playing those games, do you do something else in real life? And how much do you do in real life?
But those other people would have to do other stuff too.
Well, maybe not. Go ahead.
I actually kind of did a psychology paper on something like this regarding violent video games and the people who lose their minds and whatnot. The thing is, because of how widespread our ability to acquire violent video games, violent media, this, that, and the other, the fact that it is so widespread. You have, yes, within the large scale of all of humanity, there are going to be people who lose their minds for no bloody reason or no visible reason as to why. Just because they have something that everybody else can get for no illegal purposes or whatever, something that is easy to acquire, you can't make the connection that one immediately equals the other. And again, if that was the case, then you've got a whole bunch of millions of people playing these games who are all potential time bombs. In that case, then theoretically, under that circumstance, if violent video games therefore creates crazy people, wouldn't half the planet be absolutely anarchy and madness at this point? It's simply just a coincidental thing that they have X, and people connect X because it is violent, and other people have done, and these people have done violent things. the connection between them is completely erroneous. It is people scapegoating a media that is easy to point the finger at because it is very in your face with blood, violence, and death. But the
Just
fact
like mental illness.
Okay.
It's not all the time.
All right.
It's mental illness.
Go ahead. You'll be next.
You're right. Because it's so available, it's kind of like nobody talks about the fact that, oh, you saw South by Southwest and you ran somebody over with an airplane. I mean,
yes.
Nobody complains about movies because everybody likes movies.
Okay, go ahead.
It's not a matter of influence. This is an experience. So you are actually training to do something when you play a game. Whether it is a skill to actually pick up a gun and learn the physical movements of pulling the trigger, the tension on the trigger. It's the same experience that you get when you pick up the controller and operate the controls in a timed sequence. You're learning the muscle memory. You're getting that hand-eye coordination. Whether you choose to use that or not in another setting is a different matter. But you cannot argue that you are learning how to do the game, and the actions of the game correspond directly with actions that could take place in the real world. And that one of the things that soldiers are trained to do over and over again is to deal with the consequences of what happens after you pull the trigger. There really is, in real life, you have to learn to desensitize to what happens after the grenade goes off, what happens with that muzzle blast next to your ear. It's a real life sensation that a video game isn't a perfect stand-in for, but it really does train your mind and body to do a set of actions.
And it's becoming more realistic.
React differently to that.
And it's becoming more and more realistic.
And the realism helps with the training part of it. And that's what it is. It's learning something.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we're also getting desensitized by being exposed. Like it's a free-for-all now. I was watching daytime TV the other day, and they were talking about sexual stuff right there on daytime TV, where usually, or excuse me, not usually, but when I was growing up, it was after 11 o'clock. You know, when the kids are in bed or
well, they changed all that rule, you know, when we had Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
But we're getting desensitized.
It's how society works. Like way back in the days, like really, really old days, Roman's favorite fun thing to do was go and see people butcher each other in gladiator matches. And we, at this point, have not reached such a horrendous low. And way back in the Roman times, like sexual things were not considered a big deal in those days. You can extrapolate from that we are on this repetitive path forward, but in regards to that, you can see where I'm coming from with this. Like there is still a vast gap between our ability to just have violent video games versus let's go to the gladiator match to see a guy get his head ripped off.
What's the difference between seeing it in the
vast amounts of real blood,
or seeing it in the theater where it looks exactly like you would see it in the Coliseum? You didn't know the gladiator on the floor, but you also don't know the actor in the movie, and you saw him get cut open and the blood spilled out everywhere.
Valid point. I don't have a retort for that one.
Our theater for
so I'm going to let three more entries, and then I'll interject with something, with an observation. Yep, go ahead.
I think on the subconscious level at least, most people when they start playing violent games like first-person shooters like Battlefield 3, Call of Duty, that kind of thing, technically the only reason why you play those games is to get. Some people play those games is to escape from reality and put themselves in soldiers' shoes.
But there's also the reason why games are addictive. I'll let you speak right after this. So, but the reason why video games are so addictive is because they get instant gratification.
Right.
It's really that aspect that makes it very, very addictive. If you just take your airsoft gun and go out to the woods and just have fun with your buddies, it's not as instant gratification because you don't see your kill ratio go up, or you can buy new weapons and whatnot. You actually have to sweat it out. Reload your weapons. And actually run around until you're panting under all that mask and whatnot. It's actually physically exhausting. But video game is a lot easier, right? It's like like that. So that's one difference between video games and actually going out, to do something with your friends. And then the other aspect has to do with the physical contact. Now this is really, really a good example. Okay, this little discussion here in the classroom. Imagine this is not a face-to-face class. This is an online class. Okay, will there be a difference between a face-to-face class like this when we can just go talk about things versus an online class where we can have forums, right? We can have discussion forums. Would it be the same or not?
No. Yeah, not be the same.
You can be aggressive online because who's going to actually leap up and punch you in the face when you say something?
I can suspend accounts. Okay, go ahead. I promised you that you would be able to speak.
His question was, what's the difference between seeing it on screen or seeing it down in the arena? On screen, it might not necessarily be real. You're not going to get the same sensation seeing it. Whereas if you see something real, you might get an adrenaline rush. Some people might get sick seeing that. Just as in video games, you don't get the same sensation killing a digital character.
Okay. Okay, so I'll have
I have no
oh, sorry.
frame of reference to say what sensation people get when they kill a real person, but
That's because different people play it and they get different results. Okay, so
I just don't think the sensation is the same. You could ever compare to the real world.
it's different for each person, and that's why one person who plays one particular game and go like, well, yeah, the game is kind of violent, but I'm okay. I don't really feel that I have the urge to do anything like that. Whereas another person can play exactly the same video game and just use it as a practice, okay, to do something that will be horrible. So go ahead.
Well, I think what the big issue here is the differentiation between real and not real. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever had driver's ed where they showed that terrible, terrible video with people's brains splattered all over and don't drive like this. When you watch that video, it's real. You feel very different than if you were to see a movie where Vin Diesel blows somebody in half. That you can even laugh at that. It's that psychological differentiation. If somebody loses that psychological differentiation, that's not the video game's fault.
Okay, so I'm going to close. I will close this topic, for now. But I will point to a book that I'm reading right now. I'm 75% done with it. With my Kindle. But that's not why I did not have time to make the questions for your test. Okay.
Sure it is.
Okay, but this is a very, very, very interesting book. It's called The Emotional Life of Your Brain. It talks about how your brain, this is once again kind of related to computers too. It talks about how your brain is programmable, even adults. Okay. I'll just name two things. Okay, I'll name two items that were discussed in the book, and then I'll leave it up to you guys to think about the downstream consequences of those experiments. One experiment involved having a bunch of adults. They're not children anymore. They're adults. They were sighted. Okay, are you guys okay? All right. So these were sighted adults for their entire life. So they are not blind. They have never been blind, and they have good vision. They blindfolded these people for 5 days. Okay, 24/7. We're not talking about just a few hours a day. We're talking about 24/7. Instead of having these people bored to death because they got nothing to do because they rely so much on their on their sight, they were teaching these people how to read Braille, using touch, and also how to use sound to kind of locate objects and the source of sound and stuff like that. So they were undergoing intensive training for 5 days. Basically say, okay, what if you're going blind permanently? These are the skills that you have to learn. Okay. only for 5 days. And then after 5 days, before and after the 5 days, they did brain scans, to see, how they process, visual, audio, and touch information from the body. What they found was only after 5 days, these people were using the visual, or the part of the brain that normally is used for visual processing. They were using portion of that brain for touch and also audio processing. In other words, even for adults, they can develop, parts of the brain to adapt to changes, okay, changes to external events, okay? What if I lose my sight? Well, the brain is actually very frugal. It says, I guess you don't need that part of the brain for processing this kind of information anymore. We'll use it to process some other information that now you need to focus more on, which is touch and also audio processing. Okay, so that's one. The second one has to do with, they also do the same thing with monks, doing meditation. Now, meditation is different from, blindfolding, because meditation is all happening inside. Okay, it's all inside the mind. And they were testing these people by using they have a master meditator to basically tell these people how to meditate, what to think about, what to feel, and so on and so forth. So these novices, basically people who have never meditated before, practice meditation for, again, about 5 to 7 days. And then after that, they were subjected to tests before and after. I think this one was about compassion. Okay, so these people were taught how to do compassion meditation, and they were comparing these people before and after the meditation, when they were subjected to sounds of children crying and people in distress and stuff like that, and they were observing noticeable changes in their brainwave. Before they started to meditate, the brainwave is one way, but after they meditate, using this particular method for only 5 days and only about 20 or 30 minutes a day, it's not really extensive, they started to react differently when they were subjected to the same stimulus. Okay, people in distress, babies crying, or people screaming for help. So that means even meditation, which is nothing external at all. There's no visual, nothing whatsoever. You just keep on thinking something and again. It changes how people respond to certain things. Now, to these people, maybe they don't feel anything different at all. But the brain scanner was able to pick up and say, oh, your brain is definitely reacting differently. Okay, so a lot of times our consciousness can only focus on certain things, but unaware of changes that are already happening, elsewhere in our mind. I talked about this, with some other people over the weekend. It's basically, when you're meditating or when you're thinking about something, your mind can create new paths. In other words, okay, let's say you're walking on a trail. Okay, you're walking on a trail, and again and again and again. Okay, so let's say there was no trail before, and you're walking in the field. At some point there will be a trail, because there will be, the vegetations will be gone, and then the path will be smoother. And it's the same thing with habits and the way we think. The more we think in a certain way, the easier that way becomes the default way of doing things. Is that making any sense? And that's how we make, that's how we form habits. Okay, all habits are basically just path or trails that we have walked many times. So a lot of times when we're at a certain place, we just automatically take that path because it is already there. Okay, what meditation does is it is giving you the other path. Okay, it's basically cutting open some alternatives and say, well, when you're at this point, instead of going the path that you always go, now there are alternatives. And meditation basically just creating these alternatives gradually over time, and your conscious mind doesn't even know that, but the brain scan machines was able to do it. This is a very interesting book. Definitely not directly related to this class, but for people who are curious about what I just said, and you want to kind of find out proof or disprove the effect of video games. I'm not saying one way or another. I am just quoting from the book what they have observed. But if you want to look into that, I think this is an interesting book to look into. It talks about the Dalai Lama. You guys know the guy, right? okay? And you would think that he is, I know I'm completely off track now. We're not even on the same planet as cisc310. We are now on a different planet. But I think it's truly interesting because you would think that someone like him, okay, would have no interest or maybe distaste of science and technology and engineering, right? No. Okay, but some people do. Okay, some people have a kind of like a prejudice and say that people like him, probably he doesn't care about technology, probably hates science and engineering. But that's actually the reverse.
He loves that stuff. He loves that stuff.
He loves that stuff. He actually said that if he were not born as the religious leader and chosen at the age of 2, he would have become an engineer. He would like to become an engineer. So anyway, he was in this book. He was actually in this book. And there was one part that was really interesting. The psychologist who wrote this book invited the Dalai Lama to his research facility, right? And they would think that Dalai Lama would just go, oh yeah, this is interesting. Oh, that is kind of cool, and that would be the end of it. No, he would not leave the machine shop. He was fascinated by all the machines in the machine shop, like a drill press, the lathe, and all the other equipment. He just would not leave that room. So it's a very interesting book, in many ways. I really highly recommend this book to people who are kind of curious about how the brain works, because this book is not really just talking about, oh, meditate is good for you, or or this is how the brain works. No, these are the different parts, and this is how your neuron works and stuff like that. It's actually melding the two. Okay, it's giving you scientific observation, and also relating that stuff to practices like meditation and all the other stuff that is considered kind of taboo at one point by psychologists. So you have to draw your own conclusion, but I think this is an interesting book. Whatever conclusion you draw from it after reading the book, I think it's still good. Okay, so definitely not unrelated to this class. All right, we got about 12 minutes left to talk about stuff that is related to this class.
You have the roll sheet?
Yes, I do. I remember.
Good job.
Thank you. There you go. But this also tells us something that is.
I didn't notice we don't even use all of our whole brain. And we don't even use all of our whole brain.
We don't know how much we use because we are so focused, when we are conscious, we are focusing on only one thing. Okay, this is how I would compare the human mind to, in computer terms. Okay, go ahead.
We use all of our brain. It's been proven over and over again. The 10% thing is complete BS. It's just, we don't use all of it all the time, of course, but
it's almost like this is a computer, right? We talk about computers and operating systems and device drivers and stuff like that, right? So that's your brain. I think that's basically your mind. Okay, it's an entire computer, operating. Okay, it has all these components that are all active all at the same time. But your mind, your consciousness, what is you, is only the active program that that has the focus. Okay. In other words, in this particular case, I even have tabs here, right? Can I look at all the tabs at the same time? I cannot. Okay, that's your mind. Your mind, I think, okay, is just like that. You're keeping track of a lot of different things at the same time, but your consciousness, which is where your focus is, can only look at one tab of one program at one time. So even though I have 2 Audacity windows open, I have many tabs in Firefox, a terminal with 2 tabs here, and also a recording going in the background, the operating system operating in the background, the interrupts happening in the background. Our foreground, okay, the focus, can only be at one place at one time. Yep.
Yeah, well, Stephen Hawking, who's pretty much the smartest dude on the planet, they say that he only uses 17% of his brain.
Well, it's pretty hard to quantify, how much of the brain we're actually using, but that's a story for another day, for another distraction. A digression, I should say. All right, so getting back to Scratch. Oh, no. we're back in. We're getting back to the cisc310 planet now. Okay.
Slowly but surely.
Sorry?
I said slowly but surely.
Well, no, it's not slowly. It's definitely teleportation there. Just
Okay.
bam, you're back onto this planet. All right. So getting back to scripting, do you guys still remember what we did last time?
We allowed the cat to.
Well, let's bring that up. Go ahead.
I think we were trying to create an algorithm that would give me numbers.
Base 2 conversion.
Base 2 conversion.
Yeah. Well, this one here, you want to look at that?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Oh, there we go. So I'm controlling the mouse, the cat. I'm trying to catch the mouse. Dinner served. Dinner served, and I just cornered. Come on, go. Get it. And I think that's the rat, dead because I killed the rat a few times.
Who made that? Did you do that?
I don't remember doing it.
Was it one of your kids?
It could be my 8-year-old doing it. I hope you guys don't find the image disturbing. But basically the script is just like this. This is the script for the rat, for the mouse, and this is the script for Scratch itself. That's the entire program. It's not that complicated, is it? It doesn't seem complicated, right? All right, so that's another sidetrack here. But I do want to open up the project that we were talking about last time. So we have to go back to the folder that I created for last time. Yep, binary conversion. Okay, back to the super duper boring stuff, right? So this program does work now, okay? Do you guys remember what it looked like before?
Yeah.
It had blocks that are almost identical to begin with, and then I made the blocks all identical, and then I use a loop to basically, instead of having replications of the same blocks over and over again, now I have just a very simple program. So the next question that I want to give you is, what if I want to change this program to do conversion not from base 10 to base 2, but to base 3? Would that be a big change to the program, or would it be kind of like, yeah, I think we can do it, kind of change?
The second one.
The second one, it would not be a big change anymore. Do you guys still remember how to do base conversion when it's not binary?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look and see whether we can do it or not. Okay. All right, so we're taking a look at the program, and we want to identify parts that we don't have to change. The first part is give me a number to convert and wait. I don't think we have to change that part. The second line here is to remember the value that we are changing. We don't need to change that part either. Now the power of base, we do have to change, because 64 is specific to power of 2, power of 4, and power of 8. Okay. If I want to change it to base 3, then 64 is no longer a power of 3. Okay. So this part does have to be changed. So let's just say that we want to change it to base 3 in this case. If I want to change it to base 3, I have to go to operators, and then use the power operator. Does it have power operator?
To repeat what's
yeah, but that's really kind of dickish. It doesn't really have power. Oh man. Okay, if it doesn't have power, I can always do the power calculation outside of this. Okay, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I want to do maybe 3 to the power of 4 is 81. So we can start with 81 in this case. Okay. So I changed 64 to 81, which is now a power of 3. It is no longer 3 to the power of 9. 81 is 3 to the power of what? 3 to the power of 4. So we want to change this. The number of repetition has to be changed. So we will say, maybe. Well, 4 is a minimum because I can deal with the fractions too. So let's say we bump it up to 6. Okay. Now this part definitely has to be changed. because with binary number, all it takes is a comparison, right? If the power of a base in base 2 is less than the value that I want to convert, then it's a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0. When you have base 3, we cannot use this method anymore. We actually have to use division in this case. Okay. So what we need to do is to put some new blocks into it. In fact, I will need a new variable. I will need a new variable called this digit. And using the same convention, I'm using the space inside the name of a variable for this digit. All right. So when we base conversion using division, how do I calculate this particular digit? Well, it's just a division. It's just a quotient. Okay. The quotient of a division is this digit. So I would use set to put it here, but instead of power of base, it will be this digit. What I'm setting it to is the quotient of a division. So I have to go to operators now to find the quotient operator, which is this one here. Okay, so I'm dragging this guy over to here. And what I'm using here is the quotient of the remaining value to be displayed or converted to base 3 in this case, and we want to divide it by the power of base. Okay? But this division will give me decimal values, which is probably not what I want. So let's go ahead and just test this program and see what we end up with here. I don't need the conditional statement anymore, so I'm going to take this entirely out of the loop here. What I do need is to indicate what this digit is. So I'm going to say this digit for 1 second. And then I have to remember to change the power of base. So I'm going to put that one here. But this time, instead of changing it by 2 divided by 2, I want to divide it by 3, because 3 is the base in this case. So every time we do a conversion, we have to remember to divide the power of base by 3 instead of 2. So we'll just go ahead and run this program for now and see what it looks like. And we'll give it some really obvious numbers like 18, okay? 18. What do you think 18 should look like as a base 3 number? How many 81s do we have in 18? 0. How many 9s do we have? Nope. 27 do we have in 18? 0. How many 9s do we have in 18? 2. How many 1s do we have in 18? 0. So it should be 0, 0, 2, 0, and then 0.00 because we don't have any fractions to deal with in this case. So we will input 18, press the enter key. Oh, that's not right. I mean, those numbers seem to be wrong. Okay, we're forgetting one thing because we are forgetting to change the remaining value. Okay, so we wanted to put this one here too. All right, but we can no longer just say change it by 0 minus the power of base, because we also have to remember how many of those do we have in this case. But even the how many of those things is wrong too, because let me just run it again and you can tell what I mean by that. Okay, 0.22. Okay, 0.22 is not right because that's not supposed to be a digit, right? So we have to somehow change and remove the fractional part of that number. Okay, so let's go to operators again and see which one do you think will help me remove the fractional part of a number. And we'll even take a look here. Okay, go ahead. Which one of these do you think will be helpful to remove the fractional part of a number? What about round? Now, round is interesting because the rounding is not exactly what we want, but is close to what we want. How many people know how to round a number? How do you round 0.6? Up, okay, becomes 1. How do you round 0.33? is to 0. How do you round 0.5? Okay, that's exactly right. Okay, half or more is up. Anything less than half is down. Okay, so it doesn't really serve our purpose because we always want to round down in this case. So how can we modify or add something on top of round so it's always rounding down?
Is there a floor function?
There's a no floor function here, so we have to create our own floor function out of rounding. So how do you how do you implement the floor out of rounding? You subtract 0.5 first, and then you do a round. That's how you do it. Okay. So the way to do it in this case, we are running out of time. I'll finish this later. Okay, I'll finish this next time or next Thursday because next Tuesday we'll have our exam. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's lecture because I do.
I did. That's great.